What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Doodads podcast. He's Carl, I'm Brandon, and episode 1 is officially live. It's officially out there. We're officially part of the Webosphere. So do us a favor, go check it out. Like and subscribe. We're everywhere. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, if you want to see the video and see our handsome faces. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And come on this journey with us. Today's episode, we've got a special treat. We're going to do a lot of talking about Carl this episode. But first of all, that sweatshirt is sick. Big fan of the hoodie.
Yeah. So my buddy Drew, I mean, we both, Andrew, but AG Customs partnered with Tatted Bad Clothing, and he's been doing, custom designs and whatnot, but he's been pretty much pressing and making clothes for a couple of years now, and it's been kind of a gig, but like he's getting pretty serious with it. So I was like, I need a hoodie, and he came, dropped it off in my house last night before the big game.
Right.
And you can find him at his TikTok shop, AG Customs. Go check him out. Tatted Bad, baby.
Dude, that thing is sweet. Man, shout out Andrew. And also, speaking of, shout out Taylor Swift's boyfriend and his friends for winning that football game last night. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but
I just wanted to,
yeah.
I mean, I could have cared less either way. I'm as a Saints fan and as an LSU fan, I'm typically by this time of the year really like over the Super Bowl because the Saints have found a way once again in the playoffs to get screwed or to screw it up.
Yeah.
College football is over, so I'm kind of over it at that point.
Right.
But I want to see the commercials in the halftime show. But growing up as a Saints fan, so many people, not to say that I'm not a Dirty Bird hater, but when I was growing up, there were 3 divisions.
Mm-hmm.
NFC East, NFC Central, and NFC West. And somehow, however, Paul Tagliabue or he was the commissioner before Roger Goodell, or former commissioners, whatever, how the Saints landed in the NFC West. My entire childhood is watching the Saints be 3-0, 4-1, and then Joey Montana shows up. So I'll let you figure out how much I despise and loathe the 49ers.
Yeah.
No offense to any 49ers fans, but I was sitting there going like, I'm here for Mr. Irrelevant. I'm here for some good commercials. Like, I really could care less about the game.
Yeah.
It's whatever. However, shout out to the people who live in the desert because the over-under, I think, was 47.5. I think it closed at 46.5.
Yeah.
47 total points.
Yeah.
The underdog won.
Yeah.
How do you have this $1 billion industry in the city? I mean, in the desert, like the city in the desert. Clearly because you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, first of all, take me back to the day where Super Bowl commercials were like what you buckled up and watched the game for. Like, it'd be cool if your team won, but like commercials were the thing at one point. And also we were talking about before we started recording that I was kind of in and out of watching the second half of the game. I missed the overtime. Wife with a broken foot. And
did you see the Ben Affleck commercial?
The star-studded one with J-Lo and they were all in there. I mean, kind of.
Oh, dude.
The Duncan one, yeah.
That won the halftime commercials.
Well, and also I think it's worth noting too that at this point Taylor Swift still has more Super Bowls than Dak Prescott, and I think that the record needs to show that. And I'm also a little bit surprised that there was no magical proposal at the end of the game. But it is what it is. Maybe next year. Mr. Irrelevant can get it done. But yeah, dude, that's what I was excited. I drafted Brock Purdy in fantasy, and I told everybody, watch out, because this dude's there's something about this dude. And I ended up trading him, and I came in dead last in my fantasy league. But anyway, so today, today is your episode. Today is Kicking It with Carl. It's the Carl story, and I kind of came up with just a couple of thoughtful questions, but this week, to spend some time getting to know you a little bit better, a little bit about what makes you tick as a human being, as a man, a little bit about your childhood influences that may or may not, in a positive or negative way, have influenced the dad that you've become. Because I think as we kind of go on this trip of this podcast, we may or may not know what our influences are or were, and the molds we're trying to break out of. And, none of it, I don't think, is to be negative towards anything from our childhoods. This is not a...
Yeah, it's, it's hard sometimes, I think, when you tell your friends, hey, you're doing this thing or whatever. I mean, naturally, there are people who cheer you on, support you, whatever.
Right.
But when you start talking about the content, what we're trying to do and what the subject matter is, it's real easy to fall into the, I'm a victim. Like, let me tell you my sob story. Yeah. This is why. And I have spent decades, trying to make sure that the story I tell is accurate, that the narrative is true about myself.
Right.
What I have to realize is that if I want to tell you about my dad, and certain aspects of our relationship, if I want to tell you about the lack of male support or male cheerleading in my, I want to tell you that from a point of view of, and here I am living a really great life and very happy, got tons of things I could work on personally, but I am who I am today based on some of those experiences. But those things that happened did not immediately, they're not the crux of the problem, so to speak. They're window dressing. I mean, things happen, there are kids. I went on a mission trip when I was 17 to the Dominican Republic. And not to get too far off, but talking about poverty, we see the stories around the country. We see the old Sally Struthers commercial, for 75 cents a day, you could sponsor a child, in Africa or whatever. And you see it and we're all we're moved.
Yeah.
From our couch.
Yeah.
We're real moved.
Yeah.
And I went to the Dominican Republic and I sat with people who have no running water.
Right.
Who, 4 families in a little, what's called a batey, this hut on dirt floors. For me to ever tell you how bad I had it.
Yeah.
Just, so let me go ahead and just, the preface to anything I say is, let it be understood, I'm not here to tell you what a victim I am.
Right. Yeah.
We all have horror stories.
Sure.
Mine are going to be worse than yours because they're mine, and yours are going to be worse than mine because they're yours.
Right.
It's not a pissing contest,
No. And I think that's an important point to make, because the last thing that I think either of us want is for anybody to watch this, for ourselves to listen back to it or watch it down the road and it sound like some kind of bitch and moan fest about this and that, because I do, and that's cool. I mean, like you said, I think things like that, like a mission trip like that, or going to, it will really make you grateful, and I think too that it is important in some of the experiences that we've been through. I mean, my perspective about my dad or my stepdad today is so much different than it was 10 years ago. The story that I knew 10 years ago was, it was fictional. You know, it was my interpretation as a 20-year-old kid that didn't know and then you have kids of your own and you start to gain this inherent sense of understanding for maybe the way your dad acted and whatever. But with that being said, one of the things that, and you may not, what's your earliest childhood memory of you and your dad?
USS Kid.
Okay.
It's so, it's crazy because Ben right now, he's 3. He just turned 3 in December. And so there's this, like, it's starting to be real for me. And I believe like energy that like they're emotion sponges, like they feed off of vibes. They're very observant.
Yeah.
But this is about the time where like these real memories start taking place. And I remember my dad's mom, she died when I was about 3. And I have this still frame in my head of her. I'm in the air. So she's obviously on her back holding me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that, and there's no dialogue, there's no nothing. I have this very vivid picture and I could pick it out in a crowd. That was my grandmother. Couldn't remember a thing. Couldn't tell you what she sounded like. She died when I was 3.
Right.
I remember that. Well, my dad, my earliest memory is the USS Kid. And I was at the USS Kid and I'm wearing this little white sailor cap, right? And I'm there with him. And, I don't know that I remember anything that was said or done, but I was with him. Later, come to find out, unbeknownst to me, and I was maybe 4 or 5, I'm not real sure. My dad, he was like he was a tour guide. He was a glorified kind of groundskeeper in a sense, almost at the USS Kid.
Huh.
Yeah, he had some rough times, financially and whatnot, and he took, what he could get.
Yeah.
And he was working at the USS Kid, and in my mind, I think of that memory, and I always go back to that as like I'm with my dad doing something, and I think, and I'm not sure. I'll probably have to ask my sister. She may not even know. Maybe I can ask him, but I mean, because nobody's going to remember that specific day or whatever the way I remember it or whatever. But it was sunshiny. It was beautiful outside, and I'm on the ship with my dad. So I don't know if he brought me to work. I don't know if I was with a school or something. I don't know if my mom had brought me up there, whatever. But that's the first memory I have of my father.
Isn't that cool too? Like, and just when you were talking, like, sometimes I wonder about these memories that I have, and it's like, do I actually remember them, or do I just know the story, that I've heard other people tell me? And I think, to your point, like, when there's an emotion that I can attach to that memory, that makes me feel like I actually remember it, you know? And
that's what I mean by, like, when I say decades of, like, work of trying to, because I would, look, if you'd have met me in, like, as a teenager, as this little punk, like this little shit who was running amok of his family and the streets and all that, I had a story.
Yeah.
Right? And it's taken a lot of work to kind of rewrite and re-envision that story, because there were a lot of things that I perceived happened a certain way that didn't.
Right.
And there's still a lot of things that maybe we'll get there or not, but are where some of the, I don't know, maybe some of the disconnect with me and my dad is because I do remember him and I am accurate in my memories. And that's one of those things also, having a 14-year-old at the house is like, when I'm trying to always remember, like, this could happen later on where she brings this up and you need to validate her. Like, if you remember it that way, like, right on, like, I'm sorry that I did that, or that my actions, like, because what I always got was like, that didn't happen. And like, there are some things where I'm like, nah, bro,
it happened.
that happened.
Yeah. Huh. Well, so how far apart in age are you and your sister?
9
years.
So they had my sister, and she was born in 1971, and they, my dad, so my mom and dad met at LSU.
Okay.
And my mom chased my dad.
Both from here?
Well,
originally?
yeah. So my dad's Jackson, Mississippi, New Orleans. He was
Shout
born
out
in
Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, he was born.
Baby.
He was born there. Was in New Orleans for a little while. But went to school here. Went to lab school. You know, U-High, that whole thing. And my mom's from. Actually, my mom was born in the same town as Jerry Lee Lewis in Faraday, Louisiana.
Faraday, baby.
Yeah, and moved with her parents to Winfield, Louisiana. I mean, when you want to think of the town that Steel Magnolias that is Winfield, or was when it is now the place that time has forgotten. Unfortunately, it was a railroading town. Pineville had a big paper mill. I mean, a lot of people went there and were building society, so to speak. So that, you know, while they went and worked in these new endeavors, and you know, once the railroads were built, once the paper mill was full, towns like that, they never grew past a couple of stoplights. They never, and now they're overrun with drugs and whatnot. But they met. You know, my mom. Look, my mom grew up in a house with an alcoholic. You know, an alcoholic father. My grandfather, in a lot of ways, was you know, a lot of people in the town knew him. My grandfather was well known, but he also was who he was. And my grandmother, her mom, from all that I've been told, a lot of times was on the brink of taking off. You know, packed and a lot. And my mom, being 11 years older than her youngest brother, and I think she was 4 or 5 years older than my Uncle Bobby, because she only had 2 brothers. But like that was like, get to LSU, get to the big city, get away, right? And she did, and she met this like well-educated, you know, this you know, good guy, right? And my dad, well, my dad's dad died when he was 4, right? Which is another one of those little like dendritic little pieces to the story where it's like, I blame my dad for a lot of stuff, or a lack thereof, you know, when it came to being a father.
Right.
And it took me having to like really sit down and go, he had no dad.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he was doing the best he could with what he had.
Right.
Whether he failed miserably at some of the stuff, like I had it good.
Yeah.
I really did.
Yeah.
But yeah, they met at LSU, and he ended up, he enlisted in the Army. And so he's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my mom chased him to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Huh.
Yeah. And they got married at a Justice of the Peace.
Nice.
They're a long time, my mom's friend and they were a couple.
Yeah.
That they kind of double dated with at LSU. Were there. I think my grandfather was there, and my dad's mom as witnesses as well. And they came back here. My grandmother, my dad's mom, she had bad kidney disease, and so she was having like renal failure. And my dad wanted to be near his mom, and so that's how they got to Baton Rouge. But they had my sister in 71, and man, they had some exciting times. I mean, they
like what?
So like they lived in Yucatan, Mexico for 4 years.
Nice.
Prior to my sister being born, my parents had been to France. They had been to Europe. My dad had been to Russia. I mean, they had this life. One of my earliest memories is sitting in my parents' dining room, and my dad had this tripod with this screen, and he's showing these slides, and it's my sister outside of some Mayan pyramid, right? Like doing cool stuff that I'm not so sure too many 4 or 5 year olds do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm 4 or 5.
Right.
And so I'm thinking to myself, solid. I just hit the life lottery. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what my little brain was thinking, but I did. I thought like, well, this is cool. Like, I can't wait to go do that. And unbeknownst to me, my dad struggled. He lost, there was, work for him did not come easy in the beginning, and he later started a business that suffered to really get off the ground in the mid 80s. There was a bit of a crash. Everybody suffered. My mom had to go work for the state, and she worked for the Department of Corrections as an accountant for 20 plus years. And my dad was trying to build a business. And so there were, what was a banner year? And this is, again, it's so funny hearing it come out of my mouth, because I'll tell you how like disappointed I was.
Yeah.
I'm telling you about the summer vacation that I went on.
Right,
Like, what is that?
Right.
But yeah, so I see my sister doing that stuff, and like a banner year was like going to the lighthouse in Gulf Shores. The typical year was like the Seagull Motel in Biloxi. Like,
yeah.
I didn't get to go out of the country. I didn't get to go see exotic animals and see, the great wonders of the world. I got to hear about this entire other family that did all these other things.
Yeah.
Prior to me. And I think that my dad, being an only child, it was somewhat imperative to him to kind of keep the name going, I guess. But I think from what I understand, my mom had they had some miscarriages. They had some tough pregnancies after my sister. Mm-hmm. And then there was me.
And then Magic Carl shows up. Do you think, though, that like, and not to get away from your story, but just do you think that that's kind of a characteristic of families or men kind of as you're coming up, or this like fear over having children, growing this family is going to keep us from living the life that we want to live and enjoy the vacations, and does me having 2 or 3 children mean that I'm gonna struggle and I'm gonna fail and it's not gonna be worth, because I know, or does that then take you down as a dad, take you down the road of like, I got to work 90 hours a week and then I'm never even going to see my kids just to provide financially for the kind of thing.
So my dad is a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My dad owns a cultural resource management survey. It's archaeological survey, which is the other thing. Okay. When people are like, what does your dad do? I'm like, he's an archaeologist. No, there's no fedora. There's no whip. There's no golden
He's not looking for dinosaur bones.
That's paleontology, my
friend.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's no. He's archaeology is Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
It's Ark of the Covenant type stuff.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's not what you're doing. People, no, my dad, not to say my dad wasn't cool. I'm just saying, no, my dad was not Harrison Ford. It meant really a lot of long weeks in the woods of northern Louisiana, sometimes southern Louisiana, digging holes in the dirt,
right,
and making sure there is nothing that needs to be preserved before some big business reroutes a pipeline or expands their plant or whatever. So that's what my dad did to make money. He built and started a business because he wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
And I think he realized that he needed to provide for a family, and somehow that would sustain him and us enough so that he could go do what he was passionate about. And here's my argument, and I say all that to say to your point is, somewhere, and I don't know when it was, 25, 30, 35 years old, I looked at my father and I said, the amount of fighting over money, the amount of discord sometimes, the amount of stress, the amount of mom working religiously for this corrupt state that we live in.
Yeah. And
my mom was an accountant during Edwin Edwards. Like when Slick Eddie got caught and all that, that's a real thing. That's a whole nother story. But Prison Enterprises. Yeah. So, she worked so hard, and my dad worked endlessly to a point sometimes where, I didn't have the dad who was like, let's go do this, let's go do that.
Right.
He did try to teach me how to ride a bike. He did try to play catch with me when he could. I'm not saying my dad was absent. I'm just saying my dad did not do a lot of what I saw other fathers do. So in my mind, I felt like I got the shit into the stick. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that's the correct narrative.
Right.
I want that to be, but I remember looking at him and saying it that like around that like 25, 30, 35 years old and looking at him like a grown man and going, you just wanted to write.
Right.
And he's published, he's a mystery writer, MS Carl or MK Schumann, if you can find him, Kindle. But like, he just wanted to be a writer. Yeah. And I'm thinking, so what you're passionate about, you suffered not being able to really devote what you would have liked to because you feel like we would have been broke or destitute or whatever. And it's like, no offense, but we weren't exactly living the high life.
Right.
My family basically bought a car every 20 years. They ran them into the ground. I think my dad did his best to save and do the best he could, but we just didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we were
in the Dominican Republic.
No, yeah, right. We weren't impoverished.
Right.
But we were not upper middle class.
Yeah.
We were, other kids. I remember I went to a Cub Scout thing, right? Shout out to the Cub Scouts or whatever. But like I went there, I got kicked out. I punched a kid in the mouth and we think your son shouldn't come back.
Yeah.
But anyways, we had to do this thing where you get a badge with your dad or whatever and it's a kite. Every kid showed up and had these like big streamers. And my dad took some newspaper and some sticks and we made a kite. And you want to know the kind of shit I caught for that?
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Whatever. But my point is that he wanted these things for himself. And I think we would have still been broke or whatever, but you'd have been happy.
Yeah.
And we would have been together as a family. And so that has translated to me as a father where I'm like, my employers, whatever, I'm like, here's the thing I won't bend on.
Yeah.
If my kids have an award ceremony,
right.
a doctor's appointment, or what, like, I'm going.
Yeah. Well,
sorry. It's not debate. It's not up for debate. It's not a negotiation.
No, and I think that's such a cool.
And I will say also, look, and one thing I also want to say is that like, it does not escape me that today in the 21st century, that's a lot more possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Opportunities are a little bit more possible for work life.
Sure.
Sure. But what's important to you?
Yeah, and I think that's just a cool perspective, realization, whatever you want to call it, to have as a dad now, to sit there and look back at your childhood and be like, I am grateful and take that into account when it comes to Ben and Aubrey, just to be able to say, like, 40 years from now, I want them to be able to look back and go, he did what made him happy and he did everything he possibly could to make us happy. Because I do think that, I mean, when I found out I was having a kid, instantly my first thought was, how am I going to provide financially?
Oh, yeah.
How am I going to, and I think that's, if any man out there who finds out that he's going to be a dad says, I didn't think about money, I call bullshit, because it's in our DNA. Since the caveman times, it was our job to go out there and club down the woolly mammoths and bring home the meat. Like, that's just what we're bred to do. But I also know that my kid, it's us who have to buy the dye-free organic stuff from Target. It's us who feel like we have to provide these material things, when to her, she just wants to. When we did the FaceTime thing the other day, she had hair gel and glitter in a medicine container, and she just wanted to wipe it all over my face and make me look pretty. And that was, 2:00 in the afternoon. If I'm so hell-bent on making this money to provide these things or do that, or not be seen this way by my friends who all, does she get to make me look like a glittery, sparkly Braveheart at 2:00 in the afternoon? No. And you're right. Like, we are very fortunate to be situated where there's ways to make money and still, be there in a way that unintentionally maybe our dads and their dads and generations before us just weren't able to do. Like, I don't know what kind of living you were making in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. If you weren't working 50 plus hours a week.
Well, I mean, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. You start talking about what was the cost of living, what was a house, what was a car, things like that. What did a dozen eggs cost? I mean, all that's, and a lot of that's up for interpretation, but I try to live. So because of that, I'm going to tell you right now, like if you go look in the dictionary and you say soccer mom, you will see a picture of my mother. And it's, it's an emotional time of the year for me because this is shout out to Lundy Gras first off. It's Lundy Gras today.
Party down south, baby.
You know what I'm saying?
Party down south.
Tomorrow's Fat Tuesday. It's the carnival. It's time to eat. It's time to drink. It's time to
turn up.
Do everything. Because then Wednesday, Lent, let's go get it. All that stuff.
Don't eat meat on Fridays, baby.
Not that I'm even Catholic, but it's if you're from South Louisiana, like it's a way of life.
Right.
Anyways, but Lundy Gras, which was the 26th that year, was my mom went into the hospital, and she didn't come out. And my mom, when I say my mom was my best friend, I mean my mom. Talk about dads. What's the quintessential dad? Talks about sports, all that.
Right.
Might have been your experience. Was not mine. Hence another kind of beefy resentment that I had as a kid. Like my dad my dad got his doctorate from Tulane. Okay. So a lot of times when I would talk about LSU or whatever, kind of like last week talking about making jokes at the expense, if you give King Griffey the beef about him wearing his hat backwards at your, for your own entertainment,
right.
Does he keep playing baseball? Well, I would say things about LSU football and my dad would tell me about how great the Green Wave were and how much better they were. And they were intelligent and, there was a requisite to be at that school. And it was just like, you ever met that person who, for whatever reason, maybe they weren't as athletically inclined. My dad has asthma. Maybe they didn't do as well at certain things that maybe others excelled at. And so they became that person who shit on everything.
Yeah.
Like the moment you liked it, you were like, hey man, did you not a big Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift person, but like I'm not going to be like, oh, it's so stupid. Oh my God.
Right.
Let people have their thing.
Right. Sure.
And that's kind of what it was with my dad, where my mom, she took me to every game. She took me to everything. She was the person who, my mom's getting chemo treatments. Her hair's starting to fall out. She's dying of stage 4 cancer. And she's texting me about, LSU football, that's who my mom was. And she was my best friend. And, I don't even know how I got there. But yeah, man, it took a long time. That's what it was. My mom, you're talking about perspective and being a parent and being a dad, especially, is that like when my mom died, and especially then with Ben being born, I let a lot of stuff go. I let a lot of stuff go. Like I don't. There are a lot of things that I have friends who, if we matched up stories, there's a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah. Maybe
some childhood stuff, whatever, and they're still beefing. They're still pretty irate, and it's gonna kill them.
Yeah.
It's gonna kill them. Like they are gonna hang themselves. They're gonna OD because some of them are out there. They're sitting in prison, trying to figure out why they got dealt this hand and took these actions and ended up here, and it's going to kill them. And I don't know why it took me so long, and I don't know why it had to be something like my mom, but like when my mom died, and then especially with my son being born, me and Courtney had been talking about getting married. Like we had been together for a while, and it kind of became like business. Like it was like, all right, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And I knew that time was ticking. It took me a long time to somewhat grow up a little bit. And, COVID, all that, everything kind of threw a wrench and everything. But my mom, she died February 28th. We buried her on the 5th, and the 15th was the shutdown. And I had to sit at home and grieve. Yeah. For a lot of people who struggled during COVID, and it is not beyond me to like sit there and sometimes paint this picture of how well I did. I did, but I have not forgotten that there are a lot of people that struggled, and I'm not here but for me, COVID was a pretty good period for me.
Yeah.
I sat at home and grieved. We got pregnant, then got married. We talked about that. Yeah. But like, I remember being in the delivery room, and when he was born, and I remember thinking like, because I have a piece of my mom's hair, a little lock of it. I carry it with me. When Ben was born, she was in the room with me. When I danced with my sister at my wedding, she danced with me, like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I remember Ben was born, and I remember looking at him, and I was like, all right, I'm a gambling man. I've taken some swings and missed or whatever. But I remember thinking like, I cannot miss.
Yeah.
It has to work now.
Yeah.
And I think the sense of comfort that came was that as much baggage as I may have had, and I think as much as I could have maybe I could possibly bring to this to hurt him or Aubrey or Courtney, like the experience I had with my mother and being there with her and being there until she died, every day, that 50 some odd days from January 7th, 2020, when she sat down and told me and my sister, like, I have stage 4 ovarian cancer, to February 28th, 2020, like I realized how precious time is. Mm-hmm. And I mean that even today. So when there's like resentment, when there's misunderstanding, whatever, like friends, family, whatever, like I don't want to lose like the time.
Yeah.
It is so important to me. Yeah. So important. And so therefore, like it is, like I want to go be a street sweeper or a box guy at Walmart? No, but I will if it means I have the time with my family.
Absolutely.
That's just more important to me than anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, and it's not, it's not to say, I think it's important to just to point out that my values, your values, which I think align in a lot of ways, don't necessarily have to be everybody's values. I think that, like when Julia was born, and even still, like I can fall victim to the like classic what I watched my parents growing up, gender roles and this is the wife's job, this is the husband's job, mom's job, dad's job, so on and so forth. And I think that some of those work in my household, and I think sometimes they don't work in my house. Jamie broke her foot Friday. She's in a boot and on crutches. I'm putting her and Julia in the bathtub and folding laundry. I hate folding laundry. I hate it. There's stuff I just don't like to do. But like, again, to the title of this very podcast, like, what else are you supposed to do? Because like you said, like, I feel like that moment that you're talking about, that I can't mess this up, I can't miss moment. It's this weird, and if you're a dad and you have children, maybe I would assume you've experienced this too, but it's almost like this spiritual God, universe, genetic, ancestral thing that just clicks in you that goes, it's now about sacrifice from here on out. And it's not about me anymore. It's about this little human and whatever it takes to hopefully make a good product, so going back a little bit and let's talk a little bit about that shithead teenage Carl. Let's talk about what he was like. Let's talk about the effect that might have had on your dad and y'all's relationship. Let's get into that a little bit.
So to my dad's detriment, he was raised by a teacher who told him the stories of this really great man. You know, his dad. My dad had a shadow he had to live in his entire, like, you know, and his mother kind of was this person, this, you know, his mother could do no wrong. And he was a mama's boy in a lot of, which I was too, like 100%. Yeah, I'm not saying that he was soft, because I'm just saying, like, that was all he had.
Right.
He had his mom, some of her brothers, they were kind of these male figures in his life, but like he didn't have, but like he got constantly told. My dad was born in 1941. So in 1945, my dad's walking around with no dad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the whole thing. And like, if you know what it's like to grow up in the 50s, I think the idea of not having a father, like, it was just, my dad had a lot that he had to deal with. He had a lot that he had to reconcile and you know, make his bones about and whatever. I'm sure he might have gotten picked on or had to get in some fights in school, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, my dad had no father. And he had no experience of what that looked like. And he had this idea of this uber man, this super guy that he had to live up to. So for whatever reason, my childhood was plagued with moments of thinking that, because I didn't know any of that when you're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, but it was plagued with moments of what I saw a dad was supposed to be, which is a lot of Hollywood.
Yeah.
I think there was a point in time where Hollywood, when it first came around, the entertainment industry was exactly that. It was entertainment. Yeah. And somewhere, I don't know, in the 70s or the 80s or whatever, but we started doing these like-to-life shows, and it gave a lot of us, you know, and I'm, again, 11 years older than you, so, you know, tail into this Gen X kind of, I don't know, man. Like, I got robbed, dude. I got told, like, this is what a family looked like. Yeah, and there was it wasn't Brady Bunch. It wasn't Marsha, but it was like Theo and Dr. Huxtable. And there was a lesson at the end of the half hour, and everything went right, and everybody figured it out. And even when there was tragedy, that was the arcing, you know, real story to that episode, and you walked away going, what a happy family. And I didn't have that, and I felt a little upset, and so somewhere I met a kid, right, who he had an older sister, and him and his dad and whatever, the dynamic was a lot of the same in some capacity, and we started running the streets, man, and partying and you know, just got into mess, you know, a lot of run-ins with the law, kicked out of a number of, you know, schools. You know, my parents became a prisoner in their own home, you know, and at a very young age. And I say this because I have the people to back it up, you know, but like the people I was running with, you know, there was this little crew of about 4 or 5 of us. Mm-hmm. And one, I couldn't tell you where he's at. Yeah. I've tried to look him up since, because this was all before social media. So social media comes up, you start trying to find these people. But I mean, this was some Stand By Me, kind of like the kids that you grew up with in the neighborhood. And we all kind of came with our own sordid shit, you know, and one of them I cannot find. You know, I don't know whatever happened to him. Corey May, if you're out there, you know, find me. Another buddy of mine, Ben, he passed away from drugs. Wesley, Joey was kind of like this older brother in a lot of ways. He was a kid who at 19 years old, he had a kid, and he had his own stuff, and you know, he died at 19, and you know, that's where I was headed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had plenty of juvenile stints and exploits, and was, you know, directly on a path to go to like Elaine Hunt or you know, Angola at some point. Yeah. You know, there are guys that I know that are doing life there, you know, and it was that or die, overdose, whatever. And that's who I was. And I remember distinctly, my dad, putting his hands on me one time and saying, nobody's ever destroyed my last, like, he made a thing about his last name. He said it, to some degree, like, you muddied my last, whatever. Because my dad did. He didn't have a father, and he worked really hard, and he got his PhD, and he went through all this stuff, and he did have 2 kids, and he did have a mortgage, and he took actions to do what I think his world looked like. Right. What the world had shown him was a father does this, and that old archetype, right? And he was like, I did all these things, and my sister, and I love you, she had her stuff, and she had some stuff that she dealt with, and he just, I don't think he was prepared for what it was really going to be like to have kids in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, as a parent, and this is just reality, and me and my sister would agree, we were in a household where kids, I think we were the byproduct of a marriage. We weren't exactly. Me being born gave him an heir, with the last name.
Yeah.
My sister was first, but like, that's what it was. It's like we've sat and had lots of coffee and whatnot, and talked and agreed, like, it's a weird feeling when your dad like really likes you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, It's really cool that your dad really likes you.
Yeah.
You're convenient. And that's, I don't know. There's a lot of things I've reconciled though. And again, not to paint some, like, my dad didn't beat me. Look, there's some other, like, there's a lot of stuff between me and my dad that I don't know that my dad will ever reconcile. That, like, when I say, like, this happened and it wasn't okay and it's not right, and I will make sure I do my damnedest to never do it to my child. At 82 years old, with the woman that he was married to for almost 60 years being gone and living basically just him and a dog, me trying to have lunch with him weekly and whatnot, I'm not going to just go and bring this stuff up anymore.
Right.
I'm going to love my father.
Right.
I'm going to be as close to him as I can, and I'm going to try to be the best son I can for him now.
Yeah.
Because I am 43 years old, and we are not about to go into the backyard and go play catch.
Yeah.
Right. But I was not the best son. I let him down a lot. I barely skated through school. I mean, I was a senior in high school taking like freshman science because I had basically dropped out. I had no skill set. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. And what was crazy is I found myself in a position where I found some people that were pretty decent. They were good influences. I went on a mission trip, things like that. I was hanging out with a couple of people. I was going to this little church for a little while. And if I could have just stayed there, I would have been completely content. But eventually I had to go to college, and I had to go be out in the world, and I had to go become a man. And that frightened the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I think maybe because, honestly, I don't think I was as prepared as maybe I should have been, and emotionally as mature as I should have been when I was 18, 19, 20. Not to say like at 18 years old, you're this like super mature, but like, I wasn't going to be a football or baseball player. I wasn't going to be a congressman or a lawyer. I was going to be an average kid who grew up, was going to get a job that probably somewhat made him happy, and was going to get married and have kids and maybe try to figure out in the midst of that. But like, if that's the majority of American males, then me being prepared to just go take on that venture, I had none of that preparation. I really didn't. Yeah. Emotionally, I had no, I didn't have a cheerleader, man. I didn't have somebody who was like, again, it was always, well, if you're going to be, in the NBA, you got to be Michael Jordan. Right. It was, well, yeah, if you get straight A's, my dad told me this, if you get straight A's, I'll buy you a brand new car. And I was like, really? He's like, well, yeah, I don't expect you to get straight A's. And he told me that. Like, told me that. I'm not saying that he wasn't right or what, like, but it just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's the psyche, it's the things you tell somebody, and it just, but our relationship from the time I was probably 8 or 9 years old to the time I was about 25 or 30, it took a lot of work. And I was not always the best.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of stuff I was trying to make up for.
Well, and then too, like, you know, obviously I don't have a son, but I can, in a sense, understand or empathize with this heir to my throne, this namesake, this, you know, you've got your sister, but you're the representation of me as a man, and you know.
And not to mention, I was super drunk and high when he said that, and I had made a real big mess at the time, and I'd gotten arrested, and he was, and he made so like let's throw a little bit of the color to the picture there.
Okay, well that makes more sense.
But I did, I was, there was some stuff from my childhood where, like, when he said that, I like looked at him and I was like, bro, you did not protect me.
Yeah.
At certain times in my life, you did not protect your daughter at certain times in your life. There was things that I'd been waiting. I'd been waiting to like throw down the gauntlet about this stuff.
Yeah.
And man, I crushed him.
What was that like though? What, like, just between, so if your sister at this point, when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, your sister's out of the house,
when I was 9 or 10 or whatever, she goes to college, and she went to Boulder. She went to CU.
So she kind of,
she went, before Coach
out.
Prime. She went to Colorado, went to college, came back here, married a guy, had 2 kids. She's got 3 now, but back to back. I mean, within 14, 15 months of each other, she had 2 kids. She's married, was working on her master's, all that. She became a teacher. Like, I'm the one in the family who didn't become a teacher, didn't, write a book or whatever. But like that's her passion was writing and teaching, and she was great at it. But like that's what she did. But yeah, I went from having an older sibling to living alone. Like, to being an only child, overnight almost, and
it's still at a pretty damn young age.
Yeah,
too.
I went from having like a surrogate mother, like this second mom who I like loved and adored, to then all of a sudden kind of being, literally an only child, and then I had this visiting buddy, who would come over with her husband. It was this weird. It was like, I mean, I was at the wedding, all this stuff, but it was. I don't know. I can tell you that there was a lot of silence. There was a lot of silence between me and my father, especially. And that's one of those things that, like, you want to do me bad? You want to hurt me? Don't talk to me.
Oh yeah.
My dad is like the king of silent scorn.
Oof.
And guess what? I can do really well. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see so many things that I did not like in my dad, and I go and I'm like walking around the house like fuming quiet, and I'm just like, "What are you doing?"
Isn't that like the, not like, what do they say? The one person or whatever that you find yourself becoming that person. Just not. I mean, we could sit here for 20 minutes and talk about the laundry list of things that we do that are just like that person. What about now? Kind of let's fast forward a little bit. So Aubrey's in the picture when you and Courtney get together already, right? She's what, 5?
Yeah,
4 or 5.
Yeah. She was.
What
was 4
that like?
Slow.
In what way?
Me and Courtney. Clearly, there was like history. So like. I used to sneak Courtney out when we were like teenagers. Like she was basically lived like diagonally across.
Oh, so
the
y'all
street.
go back,
bro.
Y'all go back.
Courtney ain't a saint. Okay.
Shout out Courtney.
Yeah. My superhero Wonder Woman. she lived kind of catty corner across the street from this other girl who used to party with us, and like, yeah, we would sneak out, go to this little flop house, this guy Matt's house. It was like literally, when I say the Dr. Dre video, I'm not kidding. Like the Chronic, the Ain't Nothing But a G Thing video, like literally you go to his house, you'd open up the fridge, there's no rest, just 40s. Yeah. And like, oh dude, it was nuts. Super Nintendo, and you're just getting drunk and high and partying until whenever. And the amount of times that girlfriend of hers that lived across the street had a couch on her porch, the amount of times that I like passed out on that couch outside on the front porch. So we had this history. And so like, it wasn't hard for us to kind of start really rapping and being like, there's still, there's still something here, whatever. But she had a kid. And so it was like, I was very slow in being very present and physically around, because I was just like, what if this isn't real? What if this is just
that makes sense,
a good time and whatever.
Right.
And I remember something happened. Aubrey had to be picked up, something school. And I remember Courtney being like, can you go get her? And that's when I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And that's, and it's, if there's a kid that I feel like sometimes I feel like I fail, it's her, I really do. I feel like I fail Aubrey all the time because I'm trying to figure out how to be whatever it is she needs me to be.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Like, I'm not her dad.
Right.
So like, I don't ever want to be overstepping or whatever.
Right.
But like, we got together, then we moved in together, and like, you've lived with me the majority of your life. And so there has to be some order.
Yeah.
There has to be some direction. There has to be some discipline.
Yeah.
But like, it's been the greatest experience. It's also been really hard, and scary sometimes. Cause I'm like, I told her once, I said, the hardest thing I do is I go to bed at night trying to figure out if I did it right.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the biggest.
Yeah. Well, and I think now, like, I'm a step kid. My brother and I, my mom and stepdad have been married they just celebrated 20 something years, 22, 23. They argued about it for 45 minutes when I was at their house the other day, how long it's been. And I guess that's what you do when you get old and you've been married for a while. But, I feel like that's a lot more common now than it was when, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I think that I have, for you, for my stepdad, other friends, the utmost respect. Dude, it's hard enough to love my own flesh and blood some days, but to have a genuine desire to love this child who I would imagine it's sometimes a tightrope act of like.
Well, I got to tell you is like, the one thing I always say when it comes to Aubrey is like, if you want to know the kid that raised me, you want to know the person that really matured me, the person in my life that made me able to be a husband. Me and Courtney almost didn't make it. Like, we really, like, dude, prior to my mom getting sick, like, I had almost checked out. I was tired. I felt like no matter what I did, I couldn't provide. And and again, nothing about her. It was not her. It was, once again, this inadvertent, and I don't mean it, but it's like, I have this series of about every 4 or 5 years I need to implode because I feel like I just can't, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not, and I don't know if that means therapy or whatnot, but like, I have this innate inability to find a way to go and self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And she raised me, man. She raised me. She made me have to grow up. She made me have to be honest. She made me have to be transparent.
Yeah.
And Aubrey, like, it's, you say hats off. It's like, nah, man, what a privilege. Seriously. Yeah. What a privilege. For her to invite me into her world?
Yeah.
She's whose permission I asked. Not Courtney's mom.
Until she became a teenager, and now she's like, hey, this is my world.
she's.
And you are just a character in my movie, sir.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking trash, Aubrey.
No, like
my little girl will be you one day, and I'm not confused about that.
It's a tightrope, man. It is a weird game of like, what is appropriate, what is not, what is the thing I'm saying that's obviously damaging her?
Right.
20 years down the road. Do I need to reel it in a little bit? Like, was that really like your buddy was? Am I disciplining her or setting her straight so that I can assert dominance?
Right.
Or it's because I want to correct the behavior.
Right.
And it's a tightrope, especially right now in adolescence and all that, and her trying to find her own way. And so it's a lot of this kind of feeding rope kind of action.
Yeah.
And it's what's crazy though is like she's on a cruise right now. Some friends of ours, their daughter or whatever, like asked if she could go on this cruise with them, and which I've never been on a cruise. Me and Courtney had never been on a cruise, so it was kind of like, cool, you get to go on a cruise before we do.
Family pioneer.
So, but she goes, and like we got Courtney got a message last night that was like, oh man, she's a real road warrior. She's a great travel buddy. Like we couldn't ask for a better guest, all this. And Courtney was like, oh really? Like, how's it been going? And she was like, she navigates the ship well. She's polite. She's, and it's like, I think it is the same thing as you with other kids' parents. When you're a kid, your buddy's like, dude, my dad's such a douche.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I love your dad. Cool. Hey, what are you doing?
Yeah,
because it's not your dad.
Right.
And it's the same thing. It's like with your kid, it's like, people are like, man, your kid's just so well behaved. And I'm like, well, where is that when she's at the house?
Yeah.
But man, when I heard that last night, I was just like, I think we're doing all right.
Dude, that's what I don't know where I heard this, read this, if this is even true, but I feel like it's got to be to a certain degree. But that's what somebody somewhere, one of these, gurus has claimed, that if your child is well behaved or whatever in public or with other people, it's a sign of good parenting. That means at home they feel comfortable. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, but I want her to behave at home. I want the school or the friend to see her be that sometimes, so I don't look like the asshole that's saying, she doesn't listen. But and let's real quick before we wrap up, let's talk about young Ben. Let's having a son, and I've only got to really interact with him that one time, and I mean, the dude was big chilling, like just chilling. Funny story real quick. We're at Carl's house kind of discussing some of the logistics and stuff about getting this started, and it was freezing cold. Ben wants to come outside and hang with the boys. I'm shivering, and I'm like, this little dude doesn't have a care in the world. He's hanging out, and there's a wind chime. This wind chime's just ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-linging from a couple houses down, and Ben thinks it's the ice cream man. And I was dying laughing because, just like I'm over here like literally freezing, trying to get thoughts together, have conversation with you, and this little 3-year-old boy just wants to be chilling with his dad and is so hype, as the kids say, about the ice cream man. And it was just, I don't know, man, it was that child innocence, that reminder of that. But what's that been like, or having, a teen girl going through what she's going through, and then a toddler son.
So, what's crazy is like a lot of fences have been mended. I look at them and I look at my relationship with my sister, and I get to see a lot of things that I'm seeing it from a different perspective. I'm now a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of fun.
That is kind of cool.
Because I see how she is with Ben, and she'll pick with Ben or kind of like, hit him or play with him or whatever. And I realize like my sister always tried.
Huh.
Not that I ever thought she didn't. It's just like it's cool to be a fly on the wall.
Right.
With him, we have this thing, like especially when I put him to bed, and it's funny because we'll even do it during the day, and Courtney will attest to it. But I'll say, I love you, and he'll say, love you, and I'll say, Daddy loves you, and he says, Daddy loves you, and I'll say, you're my best friend. He's like, best friend. And it's this thing because she always says, it's so funny. My biggest fear is dying and my kids not having like their mom or their dad and having to grow up like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's legit.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're so concerned with making sure they know that you love them.
Yeah.
And I said, what does that tell you about what I was or wasn't told as a kid? And I am like uber affectionate.
Yeah.
Some might even call it assault. Like I literally, I just kiss him all the time. And that's like, it's the biggest thing. Is I just want you to know that I love you.
Yeah.
You are loved. That like the biggest thing I want is like open dialogue between me and Aubrey. If you want to get in the car like a teenager and immediately put in your AirPods and just tune me out, like I get it. I used to put on my Walkman, which kids was a thing where you put on these headphones and it went to a cassette player.
That was before the round disc.
Yeah, this was a cassette player. Yeah. But she puts on her AirPods immediately, and she's in her own world, and it's like I get that.
Yeah.
But like you can always talk to me.
Yeah.
I love you, and like with Ben, it's the same thing. Like I just want him to know, like I love him.
Yeah.
I love you. I will die for you. Your father will let you down probably 1,000,000 times. Your father will also probably make some terrible personal decisions. Man, I recently had to get a notice from somebody at my last place of business because of some financial decisions I made over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to get that squared up. Like I'm by no means perfect.
Yeah.
But again, I want to be happy and have the time with my kids and my family over money, over like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's what's important for me is I want him to know, like, I will lay down in traffic for you, bro.
Yeah.
Like I will do anything and everything. I will sacrifice everything I am and have for you.
Yeah. And I think being able to portray that, because I think that probably did exist in my dad, your dad, their dads, that feeling. But I think it's important to let them know that exists in whatever way and show that, like you said, like
sometimes it's like the verbal.
Yeah,
I mean, that's all I'm saying is
right.
I don't think my dad didn't love me.
Yeah, no.
I just don't think my dad knew to tell me.
Right. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to make that okay. All right, so in closing, let me situate my microphone. In closing, something to chew on for the 16 people that may end up listening to this. First of all, thank you for letting us in a little bit into your life. And obviously, we're going to hopefully continue this for many times to come.
We'll hear about you next week.
Yeah, Ken, we may need to book 3 hours for next week if we want to talk about me. And that's not because I have a lot to talk about. It's because I think I have a lot of story to tell. But thank you. I'm grateful just to know more about you than I already do. And but for the 16 people that may listen, what do you suggest dads do? What is something we could talk long term? We could talk in the immediate next 4 or 5 days or the rest of this afternoon. What is something that you would encourage or suggest, something that you're trying to do that dads can do?
Time and intention. Do not cut corners with your kids. Your kids are not part of a planner. Do not make it so that, well, if I do this, then I can do this with my kid. No. Be there with your kids. Take as much time as you have available. Don't ever cut corners. Don't ever sit there and say, well, I can do this tomorrow. No. Go be with your kids. Love them. Tell them you love them. Whatever. I mean, just time and intention, man.
Yeah, I think that's good. Any other closing thoughts?
No, man. Love you, bro.
Love you too, man.
This is solid, dude.
Hey, again, like and subscribe. Click the button, the bell, the dinger, the thing. Check it out on Spotify. If you can't find it, look harder because it's there. Go on YouTube. Watch the thing. Like the Facebook. Follow the Instagram. You're going to continue to see heartfelt, raw, real life content and information from the two of us throughout the week. And so go check it out. And if you don't, that's okay. We love you anyway.
And get prepared because also, like, with this, also, once we get through, I think some of these intros, you know, the first episode, then me, then you, and then kind of go through this month of February, you're going to start seeing guests.
Yeah.
We have guests. Yes. It's going to get interesting.
Yes.
So, like and subscribe.
Check it out. Love you, man.
Love you too.